I guess that is the point of making a short film, is that you can experiment. It's not, maybe not the pressure of making a feature where there's lots of investors and and you're having a cinema run and lots of reviews. It's not really like that with a short film. So why not be open to change and try out different ideas and try different things and use that time to develop your voice as a storyteller.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to Natter with Nilan. If you're enjoying these interviews, drop a like on the video, comment down below, and subscribe to the channel, as there's loads more great content coming up. Today, I'm speaking with the writer and director, Naomi Soneye-Thomas. And here she is now. Naomi, hi. Thank you very much for joining me on my channel today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. First things first, how are you? It's been a crazy year. How have things been going for you? How have you found lockdown?
I found lockdown, well, I'm happy it's ending, I guess, but it feels like we're at the tail end of it, and I feel a bit more hopeful now that it's getting a bit warmer, the days are getting longer. I feel like hopefully that's our last lockdown. I don't know if that's misplaced optimism, but I found lockdown pretty hard creatively. I found it really hard to think. Even though technically I had more time to write, I just wasn't in the right headspace to get loads and loads of writing done, especially in lockdown one. So yeah, I think it's been, I guess there are elements of it that I hope can continue, even being able to have platforms like this where we can use Zoom to connect with people who I might not connected with otherwise. I hope that can carry on. But generally, I'm like, I just want to get back out and see my friends and family again and go to the cinema again. Really missing that.
Definitely, yeah. It's been over a year for me. I've been to a cinema. I didn't go when they opened again because I wanted to see Tenet, but I wanted to watch it in peace. I didn't want to have all the stuff that you've got to do. And I just thought it will only be maybe a few more months. And then obviously I got that wrong. I hope when cinemas open again, they do release Tenet again.
Yeah.
I need to see it.
Just missed out. I went to that drive-in cinema though. I don't know if you heard about that. That was pretty cool.
What did you go see?
I saw Queen and Slim, and then I saw Bad Boys 3 again.
Oh, okay.
Second time I'd seen it for my auntie's birthday.
Oh,
but
cool.
Yeah, it was a whole experience. It was like, wow, I'm in the cinema again, kind of, but in my car, so I'm safe. But I do miss just walking down that red carpet with my popcorn in hand and ready to the excitement of watching the film.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I can't wait to go back. So you're a filmmaker. Tell me, how did you begin in your journey of writing and directing? How did it all start for you?
For me, it's been a very weird journey because I went to university and studied law, which is really the way to be a filmmaker, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. All the way through school, I was just like, I have no idea. I need someone to tell me what to do. And law sounded fairly sensible, I suppose. It's like, yeah, I could. There's a very set path of like going on to do a grad scheme, blah, blah, blah. So I thought I was going to go down that route. But I really, really miss being creative. So I finished my degree, but in my third year, I was like, I'm not sure if I'm really enjoying this. So then after uni, I went to, I joined National Youth Theatre and did a 6-week course, primarily as an actor, but also we did sessions on like writing, all sorts of things like sound design, lighting, blah, blah, blah. But the writing workshop really stood out for me. It was only a 1-day session, but I thought I quite enjoy this writing thing. I want to look more into that. So it was partially just having the freedom to write what you wanted to write. And I suppose as a group of actors, they was encouraging us to write, to create our own work for us to be in and create our own companies and be entrepreneurial in that kind of way. So I thought, okay, well, 3 of us can get together, we can write scripts, we can make them. So after that, still within the theatre realm, I went and did the Writers' Lab at Soho Theatre, wrote a play, and then alongside started writing short film scripts. Still not really directing at all yet. And then the Roundhouse, they have a short film fund. So me and a friend from school applied with an animated idea. So she is an animator. So we co-wrote the script, co-created it all together. So that was my first step into like directing anything. And also my first step into animation was because of that. And now I don't really act as much anymore. Sometimes I will, depends on the job, but I don't really necessarily write just for me as an actor. That's not my fault. That's not my thought when I write a script these days. So it's been a very windy journey into being a writer. And writer and director. So I do want to explore more live action directing, but it's just not something I've done yet. So potentially in future, that'll be something to explore.
Well, yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like a very interesting, cool journey that you've been on. You made the incredible short animation Losing Pace, which I really, really loved. I watched it again at the weekend, and it reminded me how great it is. Guys, by the way, I'll put the link in the description for the film so you guys can watch it if you haven't already seen it. And also, Naomi did a really great interview with Film London, a case study where you talked specifically about sort of the ins and outs of how it worked with animation, which you should really also check out. So I'll put the link in the description for that as well. But yeah, it's a fantastic film.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for making it. And yeah, I really enjoyed watching it. And I was just wondering, you know, for those who haven't seen it or haven't heard anything about it, could you tell us a little bit about the film and why you sort of wanted to make it?
Yeah, so it's a short animated film about the stop and search of Black men. So I started writing it in about 2018 in Bristol. They tased their own race relations officer in the face because he didn't want to give his name. And I think seeing the reaction to that video at the time, you get some people who think, oh, why didn't he just comply with what the police officer was saying? He could have avoided that whole situation if he just said, my name is this, and they would have realized that it's not the person that they were looking for. But I felt like they were kind of missing this guy. I think he was 63 years old. So throughout his whole life, he's just constantly being stopped, constantly being searched, constantly being treated as a criminal or as a suspect. And for me, that idea of that repetitive nature of being, I would say, harassed by the police is something that at the time I felt that we weren't really speaking about much, and just the use of force and the use of violence against particularly Black men was something. I think it was a frustration I had that I wanted to explore through film. And I guess, although I've moved away from doing law, the reason I did law in the first place was because I was interested in like social issues, and that's the kind of thing that drew me towards it. So I think sometimes that does come out in my films as well, just different social issues or things I think aren't being dealt with how they should be dealt with in society. So I wanted to talk about it, but I didn't want it to be triggering for an audience or traumatic. So I thought, if we, especially for a Black audience, so that's why I thought animation would be a better way of doing it than a live action film with lots of scenes of police brutality. I didn't think that could necessarily add anything to the conversation, because we've all seen videos of people being tackled by the police and being tased and I was quite interested in the long-term effects that has on people. So yeah, I think that's the main reason I wanted to explore that issue.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, you're completely right. I think you tackled some really important, urgent themes and issues with this film. And I personally, I haven't really seen that done on animation, specifically a London set story. And, you know, I was sort of wondering, like, looking back, having made the film, I'm sure before you made it, you had your sort of thoughts on, by doing this through animation, I get this and I get this. But looking back, having made the film, was there anything that you thought animation brought to the film that a live action film wouldn't have done, that you didn't know or you didn't think of beforehand?
Yeah, when I first started writing it, at first I was almost seeing it more as a live action kind of thing. But then there's one particular sequence in the film where the main character, Deji, he is growing up whilst the police are interrogating him. Again, it was that idea of repetition and how they've been following him throughout his journey as an adolescent. And that was a sequence I could see more as an animated sequence than as a live action one. As time just slips forward, I was like, I don't know how I would do that in live action. I'm sure there are ways of doing it, but for me, it became clear and cemented in my mind as an animated sequence. So I thought, okay, that was one reason. And again, I just thought, I think animation can be powerful to deal with heavier topics, but without feeling too heavy after watching it, because sometimes with these kind of films you think there's a lot of films that deal with these kind of topics I personally haven't watched yet, or there's videos. I haven't watched the George Floyd video because I think it's just too much. I don't really see why. I know what's happened, but I don't see how watching the video would be of any value to me. So yeah, for me it was that kind of balancing act. And then I started, as I was doing redrafts, I was starting to see clearer visual styles in my head of like, okay, this could be quite interesting, some of these sequences that we could bring in. Because I guess because we start with Deji as a child, there's that childlike element of it as well when it's animated and it's quite colourful. And I wanted to bring in colourful elements of growing up in East London, of being from Nigerian background, of all those kind of things, which you don't often see in animation. But when I do see it, I really like it. I'm like, yeah, I need more of that. I need to see more. I need to see more of my area in animated form. It's really cool. So that's why I went with that.
Definitely, 100%. Yeah, no, I love the fact that you start the story with Deji as a child. I thought that was really cool, and it is saddening to see him growing up and having that relationship with the police. But I think it was told in a really interesting, evocative way. And one of the things that really stood out for me was the sort of the color scheme and how vivid the colors were. So the reds and the blues and the purples. I thought it really brought everything to life. And it really, although the story can be quite harrowing towards the end, I definitely thought the colors and the vivid nature of how it all looks really made it different to other stories that tackle similar themes. So I personally really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
You're welcome. And also I gather that the story kind of changed throughout the creative process. So I was wondering, like, for you, how important is it for filmmakers to be open to changing elements of the story as they go along? Because I know that when you first start, you've got an idea of how the story is going to be. Then you get into filming or creating it, and it's different. Certain things change. Then you get into the edit. Certain things drop out. Certain things have to come in, and then it might even change after that. So, how open is it? How important is it, do you think, filmmakers to be open throughout the process to change?
Yeah, you definitely need to be very open. Because there's so many, I guess, first of all, because it's not, even though you're directing and it's your vision, there's lots of different people who have different opinions generally. So with Losing Pace, I edited it as well. So I didn't have an external person saying, as an editor, to say, like, we should do. But I think that relationship can be really useful. And generally, I would prefer not to edit if I'm directing, so I can have someone have an editor, because it is a skill in its own right. So I think generally, if you are making a film, having lots of different people's opinions, lots of different departments. It's just that when you're starting out, sometimes they're merged into one, and you look at the credits, and it's like written and directed by the same person. But generally, I think it is about collaboration. And I think, I'll stick with the editor example. They'll see things in a different way to you. So even though you've got your initial vision, being flexible enough to change it and to adopt some of those ideas will definitely make your film a better film. So for me, that external person was from the BFI, from Film London. They were helping me to shape the edit. And I'm glad we did. I mean, we went in with the script how I thought it was finished, but when you go through that process, you need to go through lots of script development sessions. And then we had a version where Deji possibly died at the end. But then, then I realized that I was kind of more interested in, not in his death, but more in what the impact that it has on him long term. So that was I guess in a way, our film doesn't have like a traditional 3-act structure. I don't think there's particularly a resolution at the end, but I wanted to just have that space to just almost like vent and allow Deji's character to say the impact that all this stop and search has had on him. And for me, even though maybe the film is less like a complete story, I think I wanted that bit in there because it's something that we don't often see or hear or talk about. And that's something that definitely came through the development process. And it allowed me to be a lot more experimental and try out different ideas that I might not have necessarily tried out. But I guess that is the point of making a short film, is that you can experiment. It's maybe not the pressure of making a feature where there's lots of investors and and you're having a cinema run and lots of reviews. It's not really like that with a short film. So why not be open to change and try out different ideas and try different things and use that time to develop your voice as a storyteller? I think that can only enhance the process.
100%. Yeah, definitely. I think it can be difficult when you've got an idea, especially if it's a personal idea and you're putting a lot of passion into it, and different people are throwing ideas about, and some of them you like and some of them you don't. But I think if you surround yourself with the right people, the advice that they give you is for the right reasons. And it, as you say, it will enhance your projects because they're giving you the constructive criticism that you need, because sometimes you are too close to a project and you don't see not necessarily what's wrong with it. Sometimes it might be, or if you add this, then it could enhance this aspect of it, which is always good. So yeah, I 100% agree. I think collaboration with the right people for the right aspects of your scripts and your projects is always going to hold you in good stead, really.
Yeah, making sure you have those people that you trust, because sometimes it can be really hard when you've got like conflicting notes and you're like, I don't know which bit to go with. But yeah, as long as you've found the right collaborators, then yeah, can only
100%. Yeah. You mentioned Film London, you know, that they were involved in the development process. So Losing Pace was funded and supported by BFI Network through Film London. Can you talk a little bit about that process, like how it was and how it works in terms of how they supported you?
Yeah, I think they've changed it slightly now. When I did it, I think we applied in September 2018. Okay. So you submit your script and like a budget and creative vision, or I don't know, I can't remember the exact terms on the form, but and we also submitted some character design ideas that we had at the time. And then after about 8 to 10 weeks, they shortlisted some of us to come and do a session with other filmmakers who'd also applied. So there'd be about 7 or 8 teams who had applied in a group, and we all read each other's scripts, gave each other feedback, and then resubmitted the script. So that was the first time you had to make a change. And we got really, really helpful notes, but it was peer-led. Okay. So I think that was really cool, because then it made me realize, even though it was organized by the BFI and Film London, you don't need to rely on these institutions to get to, like, you can get a group of people together and read through your scripts and give each other feedback, and there's nothing stopping me from doing that. So going through all those sessions with other filmmakers really helped to build a network of people who I can still go to and say, I'm working on this idea, would you mind giving me some feedback? Would you mind helping me out with this? So that was one of the really good things about going through all those stages. So after that, we had another read through with professional actors on the redrafted version of our script, and then we got to redraft it again. So now we're on our 3rd iteration of the script, and then from there they selected some people to go through to the final interview where they interrogated the budget a bit more, and it was more for the producer to be like, this is technically how I'm going to make the script. So it was like quite a few rounds, and I think from applying in September, I think we got the budget in the following April.
Okay.
So it was however many months. So it's quite a long development process, but I think it really helps to forge those networks and to make the script the best version it could be. And then throughout, we were submitting drafts back and forth to Film London. So I worked with Matt, Angeli, and also Joe at times to, with an animation, you make an animatic first. So it's like a moving storyboard version, which is also on my Vimeo, that you can watch the original version if you want, but it's a slightly different iteration. But they gave notes on that at that stage, and then we're like, okay, we needed to make a few changes. And then we went through and completed the animation based on animatic, and then got to the edit, and then again, you're making more changes. So there was lots of quite a lot of back and forth. But again, I think it's just like refining it down until you get, sorry, I just knocked my table, until you get a version of the film that everyone's most happy with. So yeah, it's the first time I've ever worked with an external person like that, really. Like the Roundhouse Film Fund, I did work, there were like executives there in that sense, like talent executive type roles like that you have at the BFI. But I would say we didn't go through as many stages. So it was the first time that I'd really had that experience of working with an external person or external team and getting notes in that way, and not just being handed money and left to your own devices, I suppose. The Roundhouse version was more like, we'll pay you up with a mentor, and which was really helpful, but just a different way of working. So yeah, it's definitely quite a bit of a learning curve as well, of working out like again, that thing of like, okay, which notes do I take, which notes do I not take? And then also you just need to, because it is quite a long time to make a short film. Like it was probably a year-long gap between applying and the film being finished. So I guess you need to have having a film that you're really passionate about and that you can sit with for that amount of time and not get fed up. And then it ended with us being selected for London Film Festival in the London Calling strand, which was a really great way to end, and lots of parties. But we finished the film not too long ago before London Film Festival. So when we was actually screening our film, I think I was still a bit too in it. Like I couldn't sit back and enjoy.
Yeah.
It's just so nerve-wracking. It's like, oh my God, I don't know. But yeah, everything around it was really, really cool. And again, it helped us to further solidify those relationships that we developed along the process.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think the this year's short film fund is opening soon, the window. So yeah, I imagine a lot of people will be getting their applications in and making up for not necessarily the lost time, but the time that they would have been out making stuff and filming stuff last year when we couldn't obviously be doing that.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see what new projects get put through this year.
Yeah, really exciting. And yeah, again, I think because when I applied, it was like a rolling, and you could apply anytime. Whereas now it's like there's specific windows. So I think that whole process has been condensed down as well. So yeah, I have no idea really how it works now, but I'm still intrigued to see what comes out of it.
Yeah, no, me too. Also, I wanted to ask, in terms of like the audience for this film, for Losing Pace, if you could choose, what would be the takeaway that you would love people to get having watched this film?
It's a very interesting question. And I think sometimes I look back on it and I try and think, and I'm like, I don't know, because it was quite a while ago. And I'm like, what was the main message? I suppose it's just about how we value, specifically how we value Black men in society. And I think one of the reasons I made the film in general was because I'd been speaking to my little cousin and a lot of the men in my family, and they were saying that they getting stopped and searched from around the age of like 12, 13, which is just crazy young. I don't really get stopped and searched as a woman. Like, I think it is more a thing that Black men go through. So I suppose I just wanted to sort of highlight that issue and make us. It was before the whole Black Lives Matter thing erupted last year. You know, it was before the killing of George Floyd. It was before all of that. But for me, I was just so frustrated that we weren't talking about it, and that we need to value people as people, not because, not for any particular reason. You know, you just matter because you are a person, and you don't need to do anything. You don't need to prove yourself. I think sometimes there's cases that, for example, that man that was in America, the woman pretended that, you know, when he was like out bird watching in the park in New York. Yeah. And then she was like calling the police and saying, this man's threatening me. And a lot of the discourse around that was saying, well, this guy's, I think it's like a Harvard graduate, and he would never do that, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, you need to respect him for that. And like, for me, I think whether you're a Harvard graduate or not, whether you've been to university or not, even if you've committed crime in the past or not, it doesn't matter. Like your life is valuable regardless of what you've done, and no one has any right to be harassing you day in, day out. Or, you know, we've seen cases where it goes further, where they've gone on to kill someone. You know, whatever you've done before, it's just irrelevant. And I think John Boyega said it really well when he was just saying, your life matters, your life has always mattered. And that was the kind of the messaging that I wanted to talk about in the film.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's certainly what I got out of it when I watched it. So it's interesting to hear that was the sort of intention and the desired effect that you would want from an audience watching this. And yeah, I think, like I said, it's really cool that this was London set, because I think when people talk about the disproportionate effects of police brutality or sort of police suspicion, it's often framed, the conversation is often framed around America, not really here. And the truth of the matter is there are issues that happen here a lot of the time. Historically, maybe more so, but still nowadays, it is still an issue. You know, even the last few months, there have been some massive sort of high profile examples. So it was really cool that, you know, this story is set in a world that this audience can relate to and understand, and also see as not perfect and not, oh, this is something that's happening far, far away. And it's a shame, but okay, but we don't have a society like that. When, as you know, the truth is, as you've portrayed it, it is a reality for much of our society.
Yeah, I think people do see racism as like, that's not our problem, that's an American issue. Even with that race report that just came out recently, it's like a work of fiction, I would say. And I think we need to interrogate the way that the police operate in this country as well. I think people have sort of recently realized, after the Sarah Everard vigil, lots of people who traditionally haven't been targeted by the police realized that maybe there is a bit of a problem in terms of how we are policed as a country. It's just something that until either you've personally experienced it or someone you know's experienced it, you would just think, oh no, as long as you aren't a criminal, you're going to be fine. But there are situations where they do overstep the mark. And I guess, you know, it's I think because the police have always been there in our experience. They haven't always been there, but from our lifetime, our parents' lifetimes, grandparents, great grandparents, the society that we know now, we don't know any different. I think having those discussions in terms of how they deal with the issues that we have in society is something that we do need to have. But for example, with knife crime, so there's a camp of people who think to deal with knife crime, we need to increase the amount of stop and search. That's what we need to do. We need to increase police on the streets and And that is one option, but the other option is also to start funding things where, you know, youth activities, youth clubs that have all been closed down, providing safe and affordable housing for people, all those kind of things. Like if you treat it as like a holistic problem, like in Scotland where they treat it as a health problem, not as a criminal problem, then your outcomes will probably be better than if you're like, okay, we're just going to arrest, we're going to stop and search every 14-year-old black boy that's walking through Tottenham. It doesn't help, and it makes them feel, it just makes them feel like they're being harassed from such a young age. And you know, even if you take a knife off one person off the street, it doesn't mean that the reasons why other people have picked up the knife in the first place have been addressed. It just feels like a sticking plaster. And so for me, I just question whether our approach of over policing, and the Conservatives are like, yeah, we're going to build new prisons. It's like, but who are those prison places for? And how, after you've sent someone to prison, are they better? Are they less likely to reoffend? For me, I don't really think so. So I'm sort of interrogating those ideas as well.
Yeah, and I think you're doing a fantastic job doing that. yeah, it's just, I think one of the things that I connected to, even on a very small level with Deji, was a sort of, maybe when he was a kid, was that sort of like mistrust in the police. I've never been stopped and searched, but there was one occasion when I was in Cambridge. I was in a car with 3 of my friends, and they're all white. And literally, we drove out of our house, and the police stopped us. And he came to the window. The only person he spoke to was me. And now I want to put my hands up and say I was completely at fault. Basically, I was in the back seat. I didn't have my seatbelt on. But in my defence, we had just come out of the house. I was about to put it on. I was tying my shoelace first. But we were driving. I should have put my seatbelt on. So I want to make that very clear. But he spoke to me in such an aggressive, threatening way that I was just like, I felt like it was very different to how it would have been if he was speaking to any one of my friends. And I knew I couldn't speak my mind. I knew I couldn't tell him how I felt or said what I wanted to say, because it would have escalated the situation. So my immediate thought was of safety and of survival, and just get out of this situation, not necessarily even in one piece, but just as best as I could. So I just complied with everything he said, and then I was just let off with a warning. But you would have thought I had done something much more severe to be spoken to like that. I've never had any issues with the police before then. And bear in mind, I've lived in London my whole life. I was in Cambridge 3 years for uni, but yeah, I've never had a situation like that. And I remember, and obviously my friends were very sympathetic, but I remember I didn't get the car back from where we were going. I walked back home because I was just like, I need time by myself. And while I acknowledged my own faults in that situation, I was thinking he didn't have to speak to me like that. And whether I know it or not, since then I've sort of carried this unconscious mistrust of the police, because I just think, I don't know whether the way that particular officer handled that situation was necessary. And so that must be much, much worse for people who are getting stopped and searched routinely for no reason.
Yeah, I think so. I think, each time you have contact with the police in that kind of way, just, I guess the chances of you having been mistreated just probably increase somewhat exponentially. And it does feel unnecessary, some of these videos that you see. So there's no need to escalate that situation in that way. But I suppose people probably go into policing for different reasons. And there are probably some people within the police who just like the power. It's like a power trip for them, and the authority that you get with it. And how you use that power and how you wield it. It feels like there's not really necessarily a fair or a structure in place to interrogate when it goes wrong. Because often when it does go wrong, they have investigations, but they're investigating themselves. So of course they're going to say, oh yeah, there was nothing wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. We've done an investigation, everything's clear, and then they just carry on. Or maybe they'll get suspended for a few weeks on paid leave and then come back or join a different force. So it does feel like, there's a big risk there in terms of what they can do and what they can get away with, and how they could end up covering for one another if the situation arose.
Definitely. And I think that when it comes to sort of like filmmakers, the responsibility that we have to tell stories that matter to us, I think that sometimes we don't want to tell the most obvious stories. Do you know what I mean? But then the bigger stuff, such as responsibility to your community, responsibility to your family, responsibility to tell the truth, that matters more. Do you sometimes feel the pressure? So say with this particular story, with losing pace, do you feel the pressure with losing pace to to tell a story that is going to mean more to you than maybe it might mean to other people?
I think as a filmmaker or as a writer or director or whatever your role is within film, I think at least at first we're often encouraged to tell stories that to sort of like tell your own story and to tell things that are close to you, or tell something like your perspective of the world, which I think for me, I know some filmmakers find it frustrating, especially if you want to say you want to like go into sci-fi or something, and like telling the story, you know, might not be set in space or whatever. So I think sometimes I feel like I don't want to just tell what I know. I want to explore and branch out. But I think at least starting with what you know definitely is really helpful, because if you're telling someone else's story, there's an added layer of like a lot of research that you need to do to make sure you're telling it properly and making sure that it's your because sometimes it's like, if I wanted to tell a story about a completely different community, should I tell that story, or should it be someone from that community telling that story? And would it be better if I just make space for that person to tell that story? I suppose is another valid argument and discussion that lots of people are having right now. Whereas with Losing Pace, because it is a story from my own community, I've rooted it in a Nigerian background because I'm half Nigerian. And I was able to just, I suppose, do research, but it didn't really feel like it from talking to the men in my family, because it's a discussion that we'll have. It could be someone's birthday and we're sitting around a dinner table and someone brings up an issue of like, oh yeah, the police did this to me, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll just, so I guess the research is like having been around that environment and having been listening the whole time. It just meant that when I decided to write this story, I didn't need to then go off and specifically interview Black men about their experience, because I'd already been speaking to Black men about their experience. I've been speaking to my people in my own family. But yeah, I don't know if in future I'd want to either, you can go two ways. I guess I could branch away from and try and tell a story that's a bit more generalized, or even if I did want to go into like genre stuff or whatever, you can still root it in your own community. So I could still tell a very far-fetched sci-fi story, but with Nigerian characters or something like that still roots it and makes it, I guess, almost like a Misfits way, where it's like it's a sci-fi story, but I'm telling it in this very local area of England. I think I connect with those stories more than just like a very generalized kind of thing. I even when I'm watching other stories, if you tap into another community, it's something that I find really interesting, and I think people are definitely more receptive to it. I think before, commissioners might have said like, oh, you're telling the story about Nigerians, but who's going to connect with that? Or where's your audience? But I think these days people know that, you know, but people are very happy to sit there and watch Narcos with subtitles on, or, you know, and there's lots of things on, like, this country is a very local story. It's like super local, and I've never lived in the countryside, but it's something that I find hilarious, and there's lots of universal themes that everyone can connect with, regardless. But I think people do say the more specific it is, the more universal it becomes, because there's lots of universal themes that we can recognize, even though it's rooted in a very specific place. I've been watching Derry Girls recently, and it's just like, I've never been to Derry, but it's just like, you just connect with it so well. The characters are just really well formed.
Yeah, especially if a character reminds you of someone that you know. You're just like, oh, right, you're that one. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like the Irish version of my cousin, and it makes perfect sense. So yeah,
definitely. And I think obviously there's been a lot of conversation around race over the last year or so. I think one of the best ways to have that conversation is through art. I think it's a way you shouldn't have to convince people or argue your points for basic equality. But I think art is the best way of getting through to people sometimes. So I think with film, with music, whatever, I think that people tend to get it off the back of that sort of thing.
Yeah. I suppose it's a difference of like writing an essay or reading statistics about something or seeing a news report, and then actually having characters where you can see a story, even if it's not a film. Like, a character can be like a painting of a character, whatever it is. It just definitely humanizes it. It humanizes the issue a lot more, and you can sort of see like, this is how it's affected me. And there's definitely a lot of issues that I've discovered through film that I wouldn't have known about otherwise.
I just thought of a really quick example with Losing Pace. When Deji's been spoken to by the police and stuff, one thing that you showed was the reactions of people around in that situation, because I've always wondered when this stuff is good, because when you see phone footage of this sort of stuff, very rarely do they do a 360 and show everyone. They'll mainly show the people involved and the sort of people nearby. But I've always wondered, like, what normal people going about their day, they're walking past, they see something like this, what's their first reaction? And different people are going to have different reactions. So it was interesting to see. It was interesting for you to put that in, and as an audience member, for me to, even though you didn't vocalize what they were thinking, the fact that they were looking at it, the fact that they had an opinion on it, maybe it's left up to the audience that, okay, what's that person thinking? What's that person thinking? So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think, it's always interesting thinking about what passers-by, so what is the word? Passers-by, trying to think about how that's written down. But also the impact that would have on Deji when he's aware that people are looking at him, and just whether that's feelings of shame or feelings of like, why aren't you helping me, or whatever it is. I think it probably depends on the situation. But I do always wonder what that's like. And I suppose it's like thinking now about, like, what do I do when I see someone getting stopped? Or I think, I've never got my phone out to film it or anything. I've always just sort of like walked past. But I don't know what is the correct reaction, if there is one.
I mean, I think if you can put the audience in a space where they're thinking, well, what would I do in that situation? Whether that's the character or the passers-by or anyone else in that world, I think that's a very powerful thing to do. And it's a cool thing to watch, and it brings that almost interactive element to it. If you're watching something, you think, well, what would I do in that situation? Which I think is a really cool aspect of it. And I wanted to ask you, what's next for you? Have you got any new projects that you're allowed to talk about?
I've been, I'm trying to think when it ended. So we did it's really weird because lockdowns happened, and it's like, I don't know, 2020 counts as a year, to be honest, because we've lost so much time. But I started doing a course with Curtis Brown, do a course and writing a longer form piece. I was writing a TV pilot with them, and I've been trying to write longer form things away from short films. And I've been doing a shadow scheme with Casualty. So it's my first time writing anything sort of under commission, where they give you like a big pack of information and like, this is what has to happen in the episode, but you still need to make it your own. So it's like working out, okay, when can I push back and say, actually, I think this character would do this or that character would do that. So I was doing that from last September, and I've just finished now. And I got onto that because of doing Losing Pace. Like, you're only eligible if you've had a film screen at a certain festival or something like that. So because of that, because of doing Losing Pace and screening at London Film Festival, I was able to apply to write on Casualty. So that's been quite a useful thing, and also not an opportunity that I would have necessarily thought would have come from it when I was doing that. And also, as I said at the beginning, I've just not been doing enough writing, so I just want to spend some time writing some more, because I can't remember if I said now, if I'm repeating myself, but I want to explore directing live action a bit more, as well as animation. So I'm now thinking of a short film idea that I could do as a live action before I continue doing the longer form stuff. I kind of feel like as a writer, I'm ready to step up to like either writing a feature or writing for TV, but as a director, I want to experiment a bit more and sort of properly find my voice, whatever that means.
Yeah, that's the phrase that us creatives tend to use.
Yeah, you're just like.
And of course, I'm sure that the audience, if they're not already, will want to follow your journey. So are you on social media? Can they follow you online anywhere?
Yeah, my handle on Twitter is @Naomi Thomas 91. I do exist on Instagram, but I never post on there. I think I've got like 30 followers and 0 posts. I'm like, I really should, as a filmmaker, post things on Instagram. But I think my handle is at Naomi_S Thomas. I don't even know, which shows you how little I use it. So probably Twitter's the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we'll put the links in the description so you can follow Naomi on there. And as I said before, we will put the links for Losing Pace, so you can watch the film, and also for the case study that Naomi did with Film London, where it gets into the specifics of how she brought Deji and the characters and the world of Losing Pace to life, which I think was a really interesting read. So yeah, you guys should definitely go and check that out. Naomi, thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed this discussion.
Me too. Having me.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I think we've spoken about some really cool issues and topics, and yeah, I'm really glad that we had the chance to chat. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, drop a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, because there's more interviews coming up. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon.